Today we're going to be checking out the 2021 Audi RS7. You've probably seen a bunch of other videos talking about how amazing this car is with almost 600 horsepower, almost 600 pound-feet of torque, and how incredible it drives. What I want to do in this video is peel back some of the layers and take a look at the technology buried underneath. Now, I also did have an opportunity to take this 600 horsepower enormous car up to the tail of the dragon, and all those things that everybody says about how incredible this car does drive, yeah, it's true. This thing is fast. That's 60 miles an hour. It's a cold day, it's 42 degrees. Our tires are still cold. They're just gonna thrash this car super hard. Audi gave me 3 rules with this car, basically. Please don't wreck our $130,000 car. Don't take it to get tuned. You know, it's kind of lame, I guess. And have some fun and do a good video. It's just so crazy. Like, it's such a big car, a big, giant, luxury sedan with all the technology and gadgets. And in like comfort mode or auto mode, you hit the throttle, the car settles, and the car goes. But it's very, I guess, refined feeling is probably how I would describe it. So there's 2 RS modes. One is like race mode. There's a quick button on the steering wheel, and then one is with all the stability control and stuff turned off. Definitely impacts the way the car behaves, suspension, the steering. It just completely changes the dynamic. The exhaust note is different, and then you get on a straight and you're just matted. You hit 70, 80 miles an hour before you know it. After having an absolute blast in this car on the tail of the dragon, it's time to swing over to Auto House Social in downtown Atlanta and do a deep dive into the technology in the RS7. Let's start under the hood with our 4-liter twin-turbo engine. So on the passenger side, we have this power junction, and if you'll notice this purple wire right here, this car actually runs also on a 48-volt system. The 48-volt system functions differently depending on the car and the engine. For example, the SQ8 TDI has an electric-powered compressor that feeds 2 turbochargers when starting off and at low speeds. Also, if you have driven one of those, please let me know because it sounds awesome, and unfortunately, we don't get it here in the United States. Think of an electric turbocharger feeding 2 standard style turbochargers. The 48-volt system also allows the car to function as a mild hybrid vehicle. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Now, this car also does have a normal, regular 12-volt system that includes a 12-volt battery and a standard style starter for the first start and cold starts. The 48-volt system consists of 48-volt lithium-ion battery located in the spare tire area, perhaps some 48-volt consumers such as that electric-powered compressor I mentioned on the SQ8, and a 48-volt belt starter generator. That's right, I said a belt starter generator. And then keeping everyone connected and happy together is a voltage converter dealing with the 48-volt side and the 12-volt side. This system is pretty cool, and the feeling I get is that Audi and other manufacturers are actually just getting started with this kind of setup. A starter generator of this style actually looks like adoption into existing powertrains will be pretty easy. Rather than having an integrated starter alternator that lives between the engine and the transmission, this kind of bolts to the engine like a standard alternator would. So with this belt-driven generator starter, in generator mode, it charges the 48-volt battery. As a motor, it's used to start the vehicle during start-stop situations, or as a booster to the TSI engine up to about 8 horsepower. This allows the car to do some pretty wild stuff with start-stop, including shutting the car off before you actually get to a stop. And the best part is, unless you're kind of dialed into it, it'll probably happen without you even knowing. Now, even though this system only provides roughly 8 horsepower of boost to the engine, I really could see the potential for these type of systems to be integrated into the lower model Jetta. Now, if you want to see a teardown of this 48-volt battery, let me know. I might actually have access to one. Moving around, here is our coils and injectors for our passenger side bank, which is typically bank 1, and then when we pull the cover off, we get to see are twin turbos that sit in the valley of this V8 engine. We have our intake here. Air is fed up through here,
and then into our turbocharger. This car also has twin charge coolers, one on the left and one on the right side. Moving on to the driver's side, you can see we have more valving. We have our PCV valve, and this giant magic silver box is actually the ECM for the car with the ABS module tucked right underneath. Something else super cool about this car is it has active rear spoiler, just like, I don't know, the 89 Corrados had, but it's pretty awesome the way the spoiler pops up. Those are much shorter than I expected them to be for some reason. This car also has 22-inch wheels, which are kind of heavy. Not as heavy as I expected though. Look at how big this wheel is. It definitely doesn't look like the car has 22s on it until you just see the wheel and then you realize how enormous it is. We gotta talk about these carbon ceramic brakes. These are the size of many wheels that I've owned in other cars. They're absolutely huge. But what's really far more interesting than that is the way the brakes cool. So air comes in, there's ducting back behind here to push air all the way through to cool these babies down. Also, I looked up the price for one of these rotors. It is like $5,900 for one rotor for the front. So big time upgrade for sure. Moving to the back underneath, we have a couple of cool things going on. So this car has a torque vectoring rear diff, which controls the left to right output of power at the back wheels. My S4 also has this. In fact, the Mark 8 Golf R is going to have a very similar setup. Just behind this is a drive motor. So this is actually for the rear steering. As you follow this over and up, you can see that this arm right here basically functions like a tie rod. So when you take tight turns, this is the arm that pushes the wheel out at the back or pulls it in at the back so that you can push this enormous car around a pretty tight turn. And we also have our rear airbag right here, a bunch of aero, a huge exhaust. Look at this exhaust. Wow. And what's cool is this has flaps in the exhaust, and that's why when we went from regular drive to like RS mode, the exhaust got a lot more aggressive sounding. Okay, now I have to put this enormous wheel on so that we can get this car put back together, but I'm not quite ready to give this car back just yet. Let's find a spot where we can do some more testing and check out the interior. Here's some of the tech in the front of the car. We have radars, our little camera right here. This is that intake really kind of sleekly put in between the hood and the bumper cover. Fancy schmancy headlights with lasers in them. Carbon fiber on the caps. Looks beautiful. But moving back, you know, I'm a hatchback guy, right? I drive hatchbacks. I think wagons are awesome. Even though you're kind of in a sedan, like the trunk is huge. Underneath this cover, we have our subwoofer, no spare tire. You do have fix-a-flat and the pump and some other tools. Behind our covers, like most Volkswagen Audi cars, we have our vehicle battery. Now, taking a look on the interior, this car is so wild and packed with technology. Also, my seat's really far back, so I can't reach the pedal. Let's start it up and kind of poke at some of this cool stuff. So you have a lower screen down here. You have the upper screen, which is kind of like the normal radio display. And then you have the full digital dash, which has a ton of different customizable stuff. Of course, you have all the goodies in the instrument cluster, but something that's really cool is this RS mode. So when you push this, it's kind of like forcing the car into quick race mode or really super mode, which I'm pretty sure is what RS stands for. Changes the display. You can see right under the P, you have the RS1. That's basically race mode, but it still has all the driver assist systems in play. If you hit it again, it switches to RS2 mode. And as you can see, we get our limited traction control and all that stuff kind of warning. Kind of like that first press of the traction control button on other Volkswagen Audi cars. Pulling back when we get to the steering wheel, we have the two rollers. I really like that with the Audi because it's a way to like quickly turn down the volume when you're going to get your Starbucks and it's time to order. But these are actually active buttons here. I'm actively pressing that and probably making the cluster sad, but check it out. You can put the map the whole way on your instrument cluster. It also shows you your sad miles per gallon. And then this little indicator here is for the 48 volt system right there, which is kind of cool. We also have our flappy paddles here. This is not a DSG transmission. It's a, I think, 8-speed ZF transmission, which has been phenomenal in the way it performs. Also, much like we're gonna see in Mark 8, no more rotary knob for our lights. It's basically all automatic. You just have this touch button here. You can see it changing in the instrument cluster. It also has auto high beams, which worked phenomenally, and a bunch of lasers and stuff in the headlights. Pretty cool. Probably about as good of technology as we can get for our, let's just say, archaic government regulations for lighting. Focusing more on the screen, this car has very few actual active buttons, but look at all this craziness that you can do. This is really one of those kind of cars where, sure, you can jump in and you can just drive, but you're really probably cheating yourself out of a cool driving experience by not learning the ins and outs of the infotainment system, or as Audi calls it, the MMI system. And there's just so much, to the point where it might actually be a bit overwhelming. I think the learning curve is a little steep. We've been in this car for 443 miles over a couple of days. It took a little bit of learning to get it down. This is also something that we're going to be seeing in the Mark 8 with almost no active buttons, right? No headlight switch over on the left side, and it is what it is. I will say one thing I've struggled with over the last couple of days is getting CarPlay to play nice with my phone. As you can see here, it's not connecting. It's weird. We've been driving and like all of a sudden the CarPlay just disconnects. Here's our map. Pretty cool. Just, it's CarPlay, right? So we can do all the things. We can get some Dunkin' Donuts, or we can nerd out on Star Wars books, which is, you guys know, something I love to do. It has all the cool parking stuff, so you can go through and change all the angles and really see the car. The minor details that I love are things like this. When I turn the wheel, it also turns the wheel on the car in the picture. What it does is it takes the two cameras on the mirrors, the camera on the front and the camera on the back, and then it kind of stitches it all together so you can just get these really cool, crazy angles for all the kind of parking, whatever. See my car right there in the back, including a full overhead with a giant Golf R parked next to it. This is actually not super new technology. Volkswagen Audi Group has been doing that for quite some time, but it's just always really cool to check out and to see. Now, I couldn't have this car for a couple of days and not do a full vehicle scan on it, so let's jump into VCDs and see what kind of coolness we can find out of this Audi. So we'll go into our auto scan and then hit our gateway installation list. So here is our gateway install list. As you can see, she's got a whole bunch of modules. Now, it may seem scary that there's a bunch of fault codes stored, but I feel like on a car with this many modules, if you scanned it and didn't have any faults, that's really when you have to worry. Because this does have the sound actor, or structural born sound maker, aka noise box, I wonder if we can turn it down. The volume is set to 100%. Let's turn it to 0. Do it. Yes. Yes. Now, you cannot turn it up louder. We tried that on the Golf and it didn't work. Rev. That was with it at 0. Let's put it back to 100 because I'm sure that's how Audi would want it. So it really, what it seems to do is deepen the tone of the exhaust, or the perceived tone of the exhaust, I would say. If this were my car, I would turn it off and I would buy an exhaust because I would want this car to sound kind of ridiculous, but it's actually not terrible. Looking at all these modules we got, diff locks, memory seats, lane departure, convenience module, obviously, battery regulation, all kinds of crazy stuff, gear shift, wild. Heads-up display, in case I didn't mention, this car does have a pretty cool heads-up display. Cool stuff with VCDs. I know some of you guys are like, Charles, we don't care about VCDs, but this is the kind of nerdy stuff that I like. And I like to think that some of you guys are kind of that way too, and you like to see this behind the scenes technology. Okay, unfortunately, we got to get this car back to Audi. I really appreciate the folks at Audi for letting us have this car for a few days and having some fun with it. This video really wasn't your typical car review, so if you dug that and thought it was cool, let me know in the comments, and maybe we can do this again. With that, I'm out. Have an awesome day. We'll see you again next time.